Please, everybody stand up.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for having me. This is my first time in Israel, actually, so... and so far, it's been pretty great. I had the best hummus in Israel, apparently, in Jaffa, and then I had some shisha last night, so first 2 days have been pretty great. So I'm looking forward to the next few. As I said, I'm Danish, and yes, my last name is like Wrath of Khan. And I work at a pretty awesome company called Github. We're based out of San Francisco. And so I want to give a little overview of what I want to talk about today. So we're going to have a little overview of Ruby on Rails and how it's kind of progressed over time. I want to talk a little bit about some bad habits I feel like we've picked up, and then go into discussing some things we can pick up from other communities throughout the world, and then a few solutions I think we can use to help out our community, help it grow, help make sure that we don't have any schmucks in our community. So, overview. As we all know, Ruby became really big once Ruby on Rails became popular. We had an influx of new users into the community that were learning a lot of new things. Rails was really young. They were figuring stuff out. They're coming from languages like Java, PHP, things people don't really like to talk about anymore. And then after a while, it kind of tapered off. And then recently, companies like Salesforce and all these rather large corporations started adopting Ruby. And so now we have another kind of influx of new users that don't really know what's been going on. They're coming in, they're seeing all these, great materials we have. A few of the great materials, if you've heard of Hackety Hack or Peep Code, Rails for Zombies, Railscast, these are all amazing, material that we have to help teach these new users about learning, Ruby and Rails and being able to really ramp up really quickly and start contributing back to the community. But one thing I've noticed when the Ruby Lang website initially went up, Ruby was ranked number 9 as in terms of programming languages. But recently, I noticed if you go to the TIOBE site, it's dropping. And the thing that pissed me off the most, at least, is that we're actually under Python, which is clearly not a good thing. And so I was kind of curious. I was trying to figure out, why is this? Ruby was really big. A lot of people are starting to use it. What's the reason that it's dropping? Is there something that, is the language not useful, or people not using it correctly, or are there just no jobs? And then why are there no jobs? Is it because, people aren't learning the language and starting companies and wanting to start projects? So I feel like there's a few bad habits that are causing this to happen. One of the main things that I feel like is not happening is that we don't follow a very core mantra of the Ruby community. Minneswan, for those of you that don't know what it means, Mats is nice and so we are nice. Mats is the creator of Ruby. And he's a very, very humble man if you've ever met him. And I actually feel like there's a lot of trolls in our community, and if Mats wasn't as nice as he was, I feel like he would be really angry about all the trolls that we have. A really good example, there were a lot that I could find, but a really good one was a while ago, there was Devise, this gem that Jose Valim created, and there were some problems with it. If you read that, a guy had some issues, and his issue wasn't getting handled in a decent amount of time, so he's like, hey, can I just pay you some money, and can you fix it for me? And a lot of people were getting angry about this, and Jose had a pretty good answer that I feel like encompasses a lot of what really we need to do in the open source community, which is, the currency is be polite, respectful, and kind to one another. It has nothing to do with money, right? Open source is about being able to give back to the community. And if you're using something and if you're having a problem, don't just throw money at it. Actually spend some time and contribute a pull request, or actually send something, or discuss the issue and figure out what the core problem is. One of the other things that my roommate actually showed me was this website. And I actually thought it was an April Fool's joke because when he showed it to me, it was kind of around that time. And I was like, oh, that's really funny. And then I looked at it a little more and clicked on the links and realized, holy shit, this is actually real. This is what goes on. And some guy decided to make a website to just kind of see how long it takes for another bullshit thing to come up in our community that we decide is something that we need to rant about and not really figure out any solutions. I did think it was kind of funny that it says powered by PHP on the top right-hand corner, though. So another thing that I've noticed, at least, contributing back myself and being able to talk with a lot of people that are doing open source is that people, it's life, right? People juggle a lot of things. They're juggling open source. They're juggling their work. They're juggling their family, hobbies. There's a lot of things that people do. They're not just working. There are a few people that might have privileges like Aaron Patterson that work on open source as their job, but most people kind of do it on their free time, right? And so it requires them to really have to juggle a lot of things. One of the things that actually happened to me recently was there was a project I was using called Earthquake, was this Twitter command line tool that would just like show your Twitter stream in the terminal. And I live in the terminal, so it was kind of a good idea for me to have. And I noticed that there was a bug, and so I went in and I fixed it. And the maintainer just never replied. There were a few other people that were like, oh yeah, thank you for this fix. It solved my problem. And I was like, man, why is this guy not even responding to my pull request? Did I not submit it properly? Did he have some contributing guidelines that I didn't follow? I couldn't find anything on the projects page, so I was kind of confused. Now he actually finally pulled it in. It required me to have to take a trip to Japan and give this talk there and call him out in his home country. I feel like that's probably not something that everybody can do, so there kind of needs to be a solution to this. Another thing that I've noticed is this is also kind of just people get burned out. A lot of people work on a lot of open source stuff, and they just decide to abandon a project because either they're burned out or it's not interesting to them anymore. There was actually a really good talk at CodeConf in San Francisco. A guy actually talked about how the ethics about abandoning software as a whole, just not even open source projects. And I'll definitely recommend looking at it. He kind of goes into processes that I explain later on in the talk about, what is a good way to abandon a project rather than just, stop working on it and allowing all these people that are using it to wonder, is it abandoned? Is the guy just like sick or on vacation and you'll get back to it later on? Did someone else take it over and I have to go to Google and kind of search for another repo that might not have as many followers and might not show up on Google as much because it's newer, and this older one that's been around for a while is abandoned, but I can't find who's really working on it. So a few things that I think we can learn from other communities that can help us kind of solve a lot of these issues that I feel like we're having. One that is kind of interesting is there's the Boy Scouts in the United States. It's an organization for young boys to kind of become men. And one of the core values that they have is about working together as a team. There should never be an individual. And I feel like that's a really big thing that I want people to do in open source, right? A lot of people will, some people contribute back to open source because there's a project they like, or they kind of want to use it as a good way to get their name out into the community, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But then, if they decide to abandon a project, what happens then, right? There's no one else that kind of can pick up the slack that this person has. So I feel like people really need to think about at least bringing one or two other people on. Even if they start a project as an individual, and they start getting more people, they could talk to people and bring them on board. Another thing that I think that the Boy Scouts have really good is documentation. They have the handbook, and that's definitely been a very frustrating thing for me, is when I go to a project and I see zero documentation and I have no idea what this project does other than the fact that someone maybe recommended it to me for a problem that I wanted to solve, or I found it through a Google search. Another community that I think is interesting to learn from are athletic organizations. They also kind of have the same mentality of working as a team. There might be that one star, but he's not going to be able to bring the team to a championship and actually, make it be successful, right? It's the entire team that works together to actually, become successful and grow and have a championship team. And I feel like that's another thing we can learn from. I realize this picture is not so good now since Greece is not really doing that well, but my idea around it at least was the fact that, in ancient Greece, there were mentors, right? Socrates, Plato, all these guys have mentor, and if they didn't have these mentors to learn from, we wouldn't have the ancient Greece philosophies that we do now. And that's another thing that's really important, especially with all the new people coming into our community. A lot of the more experienced people, I feel like, it's beneficial to them to even take some time and mentor these new people that are really passionate about learning, how to give back to the community, how to be able to contribute back properly to certain projects. And, it helps out the mentor because, one of the key quotes from Aristotle that I really like is, if you can teach, that really shows that you're an expert in your craft. Because it's extremely difficult to teach someone how to do something. It's very easy to call yourself an expert because you've been doing it for 5 or 10 years. But it's a very different mindset to be able to sit down and teach someone who has no idea about your craft, how to actually even start doing it, let alone become good at what that craft is. So mentoring is something I feel like that a lot of people, especially in this room, those of you that have been doing Rails for a long time, think about, actually going to the user groups and, mentoring some of the new people that really want to learn about, Ruby and Rails. So I know I've kind of been ranting for a while, so I want to give some of the solutions that I think, I feel like we need to do that would help us out a lot. Obviously the main thing, if you've been listening to the previous stuff I've been saying, is we just kind of need to respect one another. It's very easy to rant online, right? You're not really seeing someone face to face. You see something bad, you get pissed off, and the next thing you know, you either write a comment in a repo or you send a tweet out saying like, what the fuck is this? This is horrible. And that's not really going to help anybody, right? One, it makes the person that is running that project feel bad and be like, why is this person just trolling me the whole time? Why doesn't he give me constructive criticism, right? And it's very easy to get frustrated and then not really give constructive feedback, especially when you're not having to interact with people in a face-to-face basis, right? Open source is kind of a worldwide thing. You could be working with someone from Tel Aviv who's also working with someone in San Francisco and working with someone in Scotland. So I feel like being able to kind of check ourselves when we decide to write something on the internet, make sure that is this actually going to benefit someone, or am I just ranting and pissing people off for no good reason? Another thing, obviously, as you've seen me talk, is I really feel like there's kind of core files that every project should have, and one of those is a README file. This file should just kind of explain what the project is, why it was created, maybe core team members that are part of that project, and how, if you need to contact someone, like if there's an IRC channel, there's a mailing list, just these things that when someone goes to that page, you can be like, oh, okay, these are some core things that I need to know about this project, and be able to understand like what that project is meant for. Another one that I think is really important is a contributing file. This is really important for especially those people that want to help you out, right? It helps out the maintainer as much as it helps out the person that wants to contribute, because the maintainer then doesn't have to go through any pull requests or any patches that are being submitted to them and be like, no, these don't have the test that I want, or like these weren't written in the right format that I wanted it because the person used Emacs rather than Vim and the tabs are off or something like that, right? And like if you have a contributing file, you could just kind of outline the core things that you require from someone to put into any patches or pull requests they send to you. And so when you reject them, they're not confused being like, oh, why did I get rejected? What, did I write bad code? Did I not write it correctly? Is the guy just, a douchebag and that he just doesn't want anybody contributing to his project? At least that file allows both parties to understand what the issue is, and no one has to be confused and wondering, why am I not being able to contribute back? And then you lose people that are passionate about your project, and those are the people that you want to keep, right? You want those early adopters, right? Just like with any product, with open source, you want those people that are passionate, that are already contributing, and you don't want to deter them and be like, oh, well, that wasn't done the way that I do things, right? If you write it down, at least you have it documented that, hey, like, these are the things that I would require you to follow. And then at least in the grand scope of things, it just all really comes down to good documentation, right? The README file and the contributing file is essentially forms of documentation to allow people to understand what the core value of your project is, what vision you have for it, being able to give, have examples that show why you think that project is useful, and just those things are really key in terms of allowing people to ramp up really quickly. There's a few things that I think are also important, right? There's people that, at least like in my sense, they want to have their documentation look nice, right? And you might not be a designer, you might be a developer that doesn't understand, how to make something look good, but the thing is there's projects out there to help you do that, right? There's, Yar, there's RDoc, there's TomDoc, there's GitHub Pages, like all these things allow you to create documentation that actually looks nice so you don't have to cringe when you look at it and it's just like a wall of text, right? So I feel like there's no issue for people to like argue, well, I want my website for my documentation to look pretty and I wanted to have a nice design. Like you can do that. There's things out there, there's tools for you to be able to do that. And obviously the other thing, as I said before, is like, have a team, find maintainers. Don't just do this solo. Don't feel like, you're the Michael Jordan or, the Pele or whoever and thinking you can handle this all on your own. Because, no, it's very difficult to do that, especially if your project starts getting a lot of people that are using it and that are involved and you're getting all these issues that are coming in because everybody has these edge cases. Find a team and have people help you out. It's going to make your life easier. It's going to make the people that are using your project's lives easier. There's really no reason to look at that. And obviously the best way to do this is look at the people that are already contributing to your project and approach them. Be like, hey, I see that you're already giving back. Do you want core access? Do you want to kind of help me with, figuring out the vision of this project if it hasn't been solidified yet, helping them, figure out what 1.0, what 2.0 is going to look like, and bring these people into your team and, grow it and have like a project that's being maintained and used by a lot of people. Another thing that I think is important, at least for people that are new. One thing that I really wish was that, when bugs were being filed or features were being filed, that the maintainers would kind of tag them with how difficult they felt that task was. I know when I was a beginner, I was using these projects and I saw bugs and features, but I wasn't very comfortable. I didn't feel like I had the skills to maybe implement them. And I would look at it and I would try to figure it out. I'm like, oh, well, it would take me like a month to do that, whereas like an advanced person could probably do that in like a day or two, right? And I feel like if maintainers maybe took the time, or the person that created the issue just kind of labeled it on what they felt like the difficulty level of that would at least allow, especially newbies that are coming in, be like, oh, well, there's a bunch of people that feel like this bug is kind of a very easy fix. They just maybe don't have time to get to it. That's kind of the one that I could use to, get experience about contributing back to this project and get through that workflow on something that's rather simple, and rather than like trying to tackle something that's extremely difficult and that they just feel very frustrated about because they don't have the skills yet to accomplish that feature or fixing that bug. And then obviously in the same vein, if you ever catch yourself complaining about anything, I would at least like the other party that's listening to that complaint, to stop the person and just tell them to send a pull request to that project, because there's really no reason not to do that. It's a simple thing. If you're using Git or anything, you can easily just send a patch or a pull request rather than just sit down and complain about how some project that you're using doesn't do what you want it to do. So one thing I actually created before this talk is what I like to call the open source manifesto. So I've given this talk a few times before, and I felt like, just like with my talk, there wasn't anything really documented about the things that I've been talking about. There's really no place for someone to go to be like, oh, like, I could follow these values. These are something I can link to. This is something that people can follow. And so I created this website and this manifesto for projects and people to kind of have something to be able to read before they start a project and be like, oh, okay, these are kind of core things I need to follow and I should do, and I should have my people that are contributing to my project follow as well. So, if you feel inclined to, follow any of the things I've talked to you, go to that website, look at it, see what you feel like, and definitely even send pull requests to me to tell me, if if there's values or anything that you feel like should also be involved in it, right? These are kind of my ideas, and I definitely want other people in the open source community to be able to contribute to this and kind of give me ideas about values that they think are very important for other open source developers to have. So yeah, definitely, in conclusion, be excellent to one another. So that's the end of my talk.